Today I'm adding a little bit of pizzazz to a sweater dress pattern. This is McCall's 7688. At the end of the video, I'll show you how I sewed the pearls onto the sleeve flounces. The sweater dress itself is a very quick and easy sewing project, and adding the pearls makes it worthy of a party or a holiday event. I hope you sew along with me. Let's get started. Place your front and back pieces right sides together and pin the shoulders. Sew the shoulders with a 5/8 inch seam allowance and press your seams open. Fold your neckband in half, right sides together, matching the short ends, and pin in place. Sew with a 5/8 inch seam allowance and press your seam open. Then we can fold our neckband lengthwise, wrong sides together, and give those folded edges a light press all the way around. Now I'm going to use pins to mark my quarter points. And I'll mark the quarter points on my neckline as well. Now I'll place my neckband and the neckline right sides together and pin in place at the quarter points. Now we can sew the neckband to the neckline all the way around with a 5/8 inch seam allowance, slightly stretching that neckband as necessary to get a perfect fit from point to point. Once that's sewn, turn the seam allowance to the inside of the garment and give that neckline a good press, pressing the seam allowance downward. And then we can edge stitch along the neckline right under the seam that we just sewed, sewing that seam allowance in place as we go all the way around. Trim away some of that neckband material beyond that second row of stitching that we just made to reduce some of the bulk in the neckline. Here is one of my flounce pieces. I'm choosing to leave the outer edges of the flounce raw because the jersey that I'm using is not going to fray. If you prefer, and if the material that you're using does fray, you can finish the edges with a zigzag stitch or a serger, and then fold them to the wrong side by 1/4 inch or 1/2 inch and top stitch in place all the way around. Now I'm going to place the wrong side of my flounce on the right side of my sleeve. Pin in place along the top edge of the sleeve, matching the notches. Continue pinning in between those notches. Then we can baste that flounce to the top of the sleeve from one end to the other. Here are the right sides of my front and back pieces opened out away from each other, along the shoulder seams. Now we're going to start attaching the sleeves. Place the sleeve and the armhole right sides together so that the flounce that we basted on is sandwiched in between the sleeve and the bodice. Match the notches that indicate front and back, and match the large dot that you transfer to the top of your sleeve with your shoulder seam and pin in place. And then continue pinning in between those notches. Sew that sleeve in place from underarm to underarm with a 5/8 inch seam allowance. Repeat for both sleeves. Place your front and back pieces right sides together as well as the sleeves, and pin the side seams and the underarm seams. And repeat on both sides. Then we'll sew from the bottom of the sleeve all the way down in one continuous stitch, all the way to the bottom of the dress, doing this on both sides. Once you've finished sewing that row of stitching, the instructions also have you reinforcing this underarm area, stitching straight across along that previous 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, starting and stopping a couple of inches above and below that underarm seam. Again, doing that on both sides. Place your hembands right sides together and pin the side seams. Sew both side seams with a 5/8 inch seam allowance and press your seams open. Once those seams are sewn, you can fold your band in half, wrong sides together, just as we did for the neckband. and give those folded edges a light press. I've also gone ahead and marked the center front and center back of the hemband with pins, doing this for the bottom edges of my dress as well. Now we can take that hemband and place it right sides together with the bottom of the dress, matching the raw edges, matching the side seams, center fronts, and center backs, and pinning in place. Then we can sew the hemband to the bottom of the garment, stretching that hemband to fit from point to point. Now that we've attached this hemband to the bottom of the garment, I'm going to do a second row of stitching all the way around, 1/4 inch away from the original stitching line within the seam allowance. This will reinforce the seam. Then we can trim that seam allowance close to that second row of stitching all the way around. Fold your sleeve cuff right sides together with itself, matching the shorter edges, and pin in place. Doing this for both cuffs. Sew each seam with a 5/8 inch seam allowance. Press the seams open and then fold each cuff wrong sides together. Lightly press your folded edges. Then I'm going to mark the quarter points as I did for the neckband, and mark the quarter points for the bottoms of your sleeves as well. Now I'll place the cuff right sides together with the bottom of the sleeve, matching the seams and the quarter points and pinning in place. Do the same for your opposite cuff. Just as we did for the hemband, we're going to be sewing around the bottom of the sleeve band twice. First with the 5/8 inch seam allowance, and then once again with a 3/8 inch seam allowance, doing this for both sleeve bands. And then trim those seam allowances close to that second row of stitching. Doing this for both cuffs. Now to attach the pearls to the flounce. You can use a pearl setting clamp to individually and permanently attach those pearls all around the flounce. I'm just going to be using some pearls left over in my stash to individually sew each one on, using a needle and a coordinating thread to my fabric. And I'll just keep sewing them on until I'm happy with the amount and the placement, and repeat on the other flounce. And now your sweater dress is complete. Thank you for watching this sew along. Make sure you check out my video library for more great full-length sewing tutorials, and I'll see you in the next video.